Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're able to join us for our next edition of our 49er Industry Chats. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Cal State Long Beach. Before we start our session today, I would like to introduce our speaker. Would just like to let you know this session is being recorded and it will live on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. And also, if you at any point during the chat, if you have questions for our guest speaker today, please use the Q&A box down below to submit your questions, as that helps us moderate the questions coming in from the audience. And now I would like to introduce Austin Montoyer. Austin majored in international business in 2011 and has remained active at the beach as a volunteer and as a former board member of the Alumni Association, which is now the CSULB Alumni Council. Thank you, Austin, for being here and moderating today, and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Naomi, and thank you for inviting me to help moderate for this amazing industry chat today. I'm excited to introduce our speaker for today, Mario Cordero. And before we get into this presentation, I'd like to just give a little bit of background on Mario. Mario Cordero was an international maritime industry leader, Long Beach resident and attorney, is the executive director of the Port of Long Beach in California. Named to the post by the Long Beach Board of Harbor Commissioners in 2017. Beginning in 2003, Mr. Cordero served as a member, vice president, and president of the Long Beach Board of Harbor Commissioners for 8 years, before resigning to accept President Barack Obama's appointment to the Federal Maritime Commission in 2011. He served on the FMC until 2017 and was the FMC chairman from April 2013 to January 2017. As the executive director, Mr. Cordero reports to the board and leads the port's harbor department staff of more than 500 with an annual budget of $775 million. Mr. Cordero has practiced law for more than 30 years, specializing in workers' compensation cases. He holds a law degree from the University of Santa Clara and a Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science from California State University, Long Beach. He taught political science at Long Beach City College, served on the City of Long Beach Community Development Commission, and was vice chair of the Long Beach Ethics Task Force. Joining us today to lead an industry chat, we are humbled to welcome Mr. Mario Cordero.
Thank you so much. So I start my PowerPoint? Or?
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and start your PowerPoint.
Okay, so again, thank you for this opportunity to address the alumni and the students. And of course, as has been referenced, I'm a proud alumni of Long Beach State. As I guess I called it back then, or Cal State University of Long Beach, however you prefer. But let me start by now moving towards the PowerPoint. And again, if we could move to the next slide. Next slide. Okay, I have something on my screen that I gotta get rid of. Hold on. I'm sorry, we got some technical issues here. What is this on this? Okay, we're all good to go? All right. Okay, so now we gotta go back one slide, I think. No, there we go. All right, there's the Port of Long Beach. As many of you may know, this port complex, which is a combination, if you look to the bottom of your screen and you go up, if you draw a line halfway up, it's basically a dual complex. To the north is the Port of Los Angeles, and of course to the south, the Port of Long Beach. So I'm very honored to have this position here as Executive Director at the Port of Long Beach, here in my hometown, so to speak. Actually, I was born and raised in Gardena. I went to Long Beach State, and I ended up in Long Beach because I married a hometown girl, my wife, Gloria Cordero. We've been married since 1974, going back many years. So I'm very blessed to have the opportunity to be back in my hometown after being in Washington for 6 years under the prior administration. And there you have it, a beautiful picture of the Port of Long Beach. It's the port complex, the Port of Long Beach is the second busiest port, container port in the United States. And about 170 billion of trade goes through this ports. And 2/3 of our revenue, approximately almost 2/3, is from the containerized component. And by that, I mean products that come in by those containers that many of you see on the freeways on trucks. This is the epicenter here of international trade. So obviously it's a very important complex for the nation and of course for the region. We do a lot of collaboration here at the Port of Long Beach, working with stakeholders, people in the trucking industry, of course in the trade industry, beneficial cargo owners. And by that I mean people like Walmart, Target, Lowe's, and you name it in terms of the products that come into this port. And of course, with our export partners. Next slide, please. So I mentioned to you in terms of where we're at in terms of international trade, what an important complex. It's an essential operation here. But of course, like every other industry, we've been impacted by the COVID-19 health crisis. As a result of that, if you go year to year, based on our first 6 months in 2020, our volume is down 7% compared to the first 6 months of 2019. And of course, we are very blessed here at the Port of Long Beach because even though we're down 7% year to year based on the first 6 months, we're doing better than other ports. You know, on the average in the United States, container gateways have lost as much as 20%. So obviously the COVID-19 impacts have certainly come here to the Port of Long Beach. And of course, we all know what the impacts are to the economy. So it's a very tough situation that we're going through as a nation. But however, the port here is open, the business is moving. And again, the cargo that comes through here is so important, not only to the average person here in the United States, but also to business. And of course, an important aspect to our economy. Now, if we go on to the next slide, you know, prior to COVID-19, I'm talking, if you go back to February, we were already in a difficult dynamic because of the trade war. Many of you know that there's been an ongoing geopolitical discussion between China and the United States with regard to these important issues that have been raised with regard to trade. But on the other hand, it's a policy that, of course, from a port perspective, we've had some negative impacts. And when you look at China, China is the epicenter of the global manufacturing here in the world. So for Southern California here in Port of Long Beach, we are the gateway to China. And as a result of the trade war, you could argue, as the chart will show, the data, that our imports are down from China approximately 25%. Now, we do have some good news in terms of imports coming from other regions like Southeast Asia. But nevertheless, you see here that the difference still results in volume loss for us here at the Port of Long Beach. Next slide, please. Now, this impact of the trade war has certainly affected our exports. Again, if you look at the China component here, our exports are down 25%. But in terms of other regions, we have good news that our exports are up to other regions at the tune of around 10%. Primarily, we're talking about Southeast Asia, countries like Vietnam and Thailand. But again, even though we have the good news about the export potentials in other areas, we still are at a negative here with regard to how we've been impacted here in terms of the trade war. This is again prior to COVID-19. Next slide, please. Now, blank sailings essentially means vessels that have been canceled, that is, that were destined to come to Long Beach from Asia. And there you see on the chart, in terms of the number of blank sailings we've had in the San Pedro Bay complex. And for those of you who may not know what San Pedro Bay stands for, it's the combination of Long Beach and Los Angeles. So in combination, in the first quarter, there were 60 canceled vessel calls here. And now in the second quarter, we have 45. But the good news for Long Beach is we haven't been as severely impacted as Los Angeles, but nevertheless, as a gateway, obviously you see the impact there. That's not good news in terms of our potential here, what this port complex means to the nation. Next slide, please. those of you who know may not know what TEUs stands for is 20 equivalent units. So when you look at the container that you see on these trucks on the freeway, those containers on the average are 40-foot containers. When this industry started, the containerized industry, those containers were 20 feet in length. So basically, again, when you look at that size of a container, and today, most of them are 40. So that's what TEUs stands for. Now you see here the volume loss that we've suffered when you compare 2018, 2019, and 2020. Now, again, it's about a 7% volume loss when you look to the first 6 months of 2020 compared to the first 6 months of 2019. Next slide, please. Now, as we come now to the what we call the peak season, and basically that means peak season annually reflects to those months that we have a very high volume of containers. And usually those months are July, August, September. And the reason why historically we've had that peak, a high peak in those months, which we call peak season, is because all these goods that come in from Asia in preparation for the consumer demand for the back to school shopping, and then as we approach past September, the holiday season, those have been very good months for the shipping industry and the trade industry. But again, as you look to what we look, as we look to what we're seeing now in terms of peak season, we're a little bit concerned with regard to the decline that we've had both in the first and second quarter. So again, it's an ongoing dynamic regarding the impacts of not only the trade war, the impacts of COVID-19, and the impacts as we are all experiencing with regard to the economy. Next slide, please. Now, what has Long Beach, specifically the port, have done here to be proactive on this issue? Well, here you have the Business Recovery Task Force. And the Business Recovery Task Force has 5 objectives, and you see that on your screen. And the whole purpose of this is for us to be very proactive with regard to making sure that our customer service, working with our marine terminal operators, that is those private companies in the port complex are in the business of moving the cargo. In partnership with them, we, for example, expedite health supplies that are so important to not only the city of Long Beach, but the state of California. And that we work with our stakeholders to make sure the cargo is fluid and kind of study basically the business forecast. You know, what is it that we can do in preparation to deal with some of the challenges that have come because of the COVID-19. And so in this regard, again, we have this Business Recovery Task Force that's headed by Deputy Director, Dr. Noen Hasegawa. And of course, that team is doing a great job to put us in a position, again, to maximize our efforts to look forward to recovery at some point, which, by the way, I think it's fair to say that we're not looking to any economic recovery anytime in the near future. That is what we reflect as a V recovery shape. But on the other hand, at whatever point that is, we want to be ready to make sure that we maximize the opportunities here at the Port of Long Beach. Next slide, please. Now, this is a very interesting information you can find on our website. By the way, one of the improvements that we've done here at the Port of Long Beach in the last year was to elevate our website. So I would encourage your viewers to go on our website here at the Port of Long Beach. And when you follow this very interesting information in terms of our gate hours, you know, the container vessels that are here calling at the Port of Long Beach, and those that are in fact in the harbor that are discharging or loading cargo. You can follow this by going into pov.com/COVID-19. This is a great education for anybody that wants to look into the type of trade movement that we have here in Long Beach. Now, having said that, I think it's very important that for people in this region, you have an opportunity to really look at the operation of one of the greatest and largest gateways of the country. You know, for many of us who live in Long Beach, there are many people who don't know really what transpires here at this port. So from my perspective, I think the city is very blessed by having a gateway that's so important to the economy and the prosperity from the movement of this cargo. Again, I'm proud to say benefits not only the city, the region, the state, but of course our community here in Long Beach at the level of our engagement with the community and what we do for the nonprofits, what we do to sponsor events, and of course, as some of you know in the educational community, how we partner with the educational community in Long Beach, particularly Long Beach State and Long Beach City College. So again, at the end of the day, it's a business operation, but we have a high level of social responsibility here at the Port of Long Beach. Now, moving to the next slide, you'll see there a picture of the MSC vessel. It is the Mediterranean Shipping Company. That vessel, and you see those containers that I referred to as TEUs. That vessel here was here in Long Beach recently, and that carries 17,000 containers. That's a lot of containers. And here at the Long Beach, we did a historic move at that point of moving 250 container moves per hour. And at the end of the day, after all said and done with the movement of this vessel, we moved what was equivalent to 30,700 TEU containers. Now, to put this in perspective, back when I was a commissioner from 2003 to 2011, when I was a commissioner in those years and before I went to Washington, D.C., if we had an 8,000 vessel, that was considered pretty large and one of the what we call mega vessels back in the day. Here we are now in 2020, and that mega vessel now is considered a 17,000 TEU vessel. And here in Long Beach, we recently had a vessel that was as big as a 23,000 TEU vessel. So obviously, the size of vessels in the international transport of containers have been a lot larger. So again, it just shows you the dynamic ability of this port, the Port of Long Beach, to handle or serve one of the largest vessels in the world. Next slide. Now this slide indicates what we've done here at the Port of Long Beach to make sure that we have what we call the PPEs, the personal protective equipment. Obviously, in today's world, what we call a new normal, how important it is for our workers and for all of us, as a matter of fact, to make sure that we wear our masks. And again, for our essential workers that work here at the Port of Long Beach, that we provide the necessary sanitation outlets in terms of what they need to do to, again, constantly keep their hands clean, have facial masks, and of course, any measures that we can take in partnership with, again, our marine terminal operators and the IOW to make sure that it's a safe environment here to work at the waterfront. So this has been a big priority for the Port of Long Beach to procure as many PPEs as possible. Right now, initially back in March, I mandated a target to have at least a 6-month supply. And of course, that target has been elevated now to have at least a 12-month supply. And I want to thank the staff here at the Port of Long Beach. They're doing an excellent job in meeting those targets. Now going to the next slide, please. Capital improvements. So for those of you who drive here and look at the port, ordinarily we have summer tours where we sponsor free tours on some of the harbor boats here, so you can have a firsthand visit of behind the harbor here and how our terminals work. But of course, with the COVID-19 crisis, we are not having that this summer. But nevertheless, the amount of improvements that we're doing here for the next 10 years are to the tune of $2 billion. You know, upgrading our marine terminals, upgrading our rail efficiencies. So I'll talk more about rail in a minute. But again, here you see the very important capital improvement projects that we have here in place for the next 10 years. Next slide. One of the exciting events that is coming is in September, we're going to debut or open up the new Gerald Desmond Bridge, what we refer to as the Bridge to Everywhere. This is a $1.5 billion endeavor by the Port of Long Beach. Again, to those of you who live in the Long Beach, or if you don't, if you visit Long Beach, come down and you'll have the opportunity to kind of view this bridge in its final construction steps that we're taking here. And so we expect to open up this new bridge in September of this year. And we're a little bit more than 2 months short of that. So we're very excited about this. This is the tallest cable stayed bridge in the state of California, and the second tallest in the country. So it's a great endeavor, and primarily the whole objective here is we're widening the bridge to include another lane on both directions to accommodate the numerous trucking drays that happens here in the port complex. So, and it's also going to be, again, a commuter friendly. We have also an emergency lane in each direction. And for the community, this bridge is also going to have a bike route and pedestrian walkway. So again, we're very excited about this endeavor. And the reason we call it a bridge to everywhere in terms here at the Port of Long Beach is because of the fact that these container trucks that go over this bridge, there's not one congressional district in the mainland of the United States that cannot say they have received a container coming from this port complex or going over this bridge. So that's the name that we've given it here informally, the bridge to everywhere. All right, next slide, please. I talked about our capital improvement project for the next 2 years, but this actually goes back to the year 2010, in which we commenced here at the Port of Long Beach a $4 billion capital improvement project. I just talked about the bridge, that's one, and here's a second mega project that we did as part of our $4 billion capital improvement project that commenced back in 2010, and this is the Long Beach Container Terminal. We are still in a construction phase of this terminal. However, it is 2/3 complete. We're in the last phase of this project, and the terminal today is working in a very fluid manner. You know, cargo is moving through this container after completion of both phase 1 and phase 2. To put this in perspective, this terminal alone, after all said and done completion, will have the capability of moving as much as 3.5 million containers, TEUs. Now, when you look at that number, if you were to categorize our nation's leading container ports based on container movements, this terminal would be number 6 just by itself. Now, again, this is a great endeavor by the Port of Long Beach. We are looking forward now to, in year 2021, to inaugurate what will be the full completion of the state-of-the-art terminal. Obviously, it's electrified. So the good news with that, it's going to be an operation that's going to be substantially and has already reduced emissions from port operations. We're very proud of this project. And again, so stay tuned for the opening of, or the full opening of this project. And that's going to be set for early 2021. But there again, you see those cranes that you see there are, cost about $19 million each. And they will be able to serve some of the largest vessels in the world at the tune of 20,000 plus containers on one vessel. Next slide. As mentioned before, going forward, we have about $2 billion in capital improvement projects. Half of that, approximately $1 billion, specifically for our rail projects. And again, our whole objective here is to make sure that we promote on-dock rail. And by that, I mean container that comes off a vessel and immediately goes on a track, that is on a train, put onto a train to go out of the complex. That process is referred to as on-dock rail movement of containers. Given the urban setting that we have here at the Port of Long Beach, it behooves us to make sure that we further the movement of containers as much as possible on rail as opposed to trucking. Trucking is always going to be part of the drayage or of the container movement platform here at the Port of Long Beach. But the good news is, as we continue to grow, we're going to have a good percentage. The goal is at least 35% in the near term, that is in the next 10 years, that could be moved by rail. Next slide. The economic outlook. So whether you're interested in international trade or not, we're all interested, a lot of us are interested in the economic outlook. Now keep in mind that from our perspective, the importance of international trade to the economy is predicted that in another 10 years, it could be 2/3 of our GDP. That's how important trade is to our economy. The economic outlook right now, in accordance to the UCLA Anderson forecast, obviously in March, they formally indicated that we are in a recession. And so the National Retail Federation's economist, a gentleman named Jack Kleinheinz, he doesn't see recovery anytime soon. So it's going to be a time that as a society, as a community, we just have to kind of bear down and go through this. We'll get through this as we have in other recessions. And of course, I think we're looking to better days ahead economically post a COVID-19 vaccine. So again, for the year 2020, as far as the Port of Long Beach is concerned, we'll be fine. We're going to continue to survive in this very important essential operation. But what we are doing is we are building. So for me, in a time of crisis, we continue to build. We provide the jobs for the men and women here in the Harvard complex. And in addition, we build for the future. Because I'm very confident that the plan of action that the Port of Long Beach resume shows that in tough times, like in the global recession of 2008, 2009, we made decisions to build this dynamic bridge. We made decisions to move forward and build a state-of-the-art terminal. And those projects are going to be paying off very, very soon. So with the same fortitude, we're going to move forward as how we prepare ourselves to compete in the next 10 years. So this gives you a very brief portrayal of what we have here at the Port of Long Beach. And again, thank you again for this opportunity to give again a summary of what we do here at the Port of Long Beach. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mario, so much. Yeah, so we do have a few questions from the audience, and I will go ahead and read them for you. And I think they kind of are split between two fields. One is kind of looking at the port's response to COVID and kind of the safety of staff and the procedures put in place. And the other is kind of looking at hiring practices of the port and any implications that COVID may have had and how folks maybe get into maritime and trade, international trade. So I'll go ahead and read the first couple of questions for you. So the first one is, what is the status of your current hiring numbers or opportunities? And then have you had to hire any specialists as they relate to COVID in terms of sanitation and monitoring and so forth?
Okay, well, first of all, we are hiring here at the Port of Long Beach. You know, we've been very blessed in how we've handled our finances in the last several years. My managing director, Sam Juneblatt, has done an excellent job in the last couple of years to make sure he keeps us in a very fiscal, conservative mode. And as a result of that, right now we're able to continue, as I've indicated, our capital improvement projects and continue to fill some vacancies. Many agencies aren't able to do that because of the severe COVID-19 impact. However, here at Long Beach, despite the impact that I've indicated that we've had from COVID-19, we are still in the position to move forward to hire some vacancies that we have. Now, as it relates to hiring specifically with regard to the COVID-19 situation, you know, we are part of the city of Long Beach. We're a department of the city. So, you know, we look forward to, as we have, working with the city of Long Beach to make sure that this plan of action to address the COVID-19 impacts, and I think Mayor Robert Garcia, another Long Beach State alumni, has done a great job and as a leader here in Long Beach to make sure that we deal with this crisis in the best way we can. So I think with regard to the specific role and positions and skill set that we need for COVID-19 issues, we've worked very closely with the city to meet those dynamics. And I'd like to also say a lot of work is being done, great leadership and work done by the Long Beach City Manager, Tom Modica, and the City Council. And last, the people that I work for, the 5 commissioners here at the Port of Long Beach, I think again, together, all those people that I've named, it really shows true collaboration in terms of what we could do as a city, as a port, and as a community to address this very serious health pandemic.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that. I know both the mayor and the city council have taken a number of actions in order to help support residents and business owners of the city as they face a number of challenging times during this pandemic. And so it's good to hear that the port is also in collaboration with both city management and leadership, coming up with solutions to help solve an ongoing problem. And then another question regards to kind of the hiring practices, and really this is looking at our graduating seniors that are coming out in international business, international trade backgrounds that are looking to one day hopefully work in maritime or work for the Port of Long Beach. Can you provide any type of advice on as it relates to those looking for entry-level jobs within the Port of Long Beach? And then secondly, given the uncertainty that's going on and the dips and flows of both the demand and supply and not knowing where the economy will be, what is some lasting advice you can provide to graduating seniors that may be able to encourage them to continue to move forward?
Well, Austin, you have presented what we call in the legal community a compound question. There's a couple parts to your question. So let me say, first of all, what is my advice? Well, first of all, my advice is to follow what Austin has done. Go to a great university, get an education in international trade, and be in a position to really be a beneficiary in terms of what this industry can offer. So I think more particularly, Austin, I also want to say to the people of color like yourself and myself, in this industry, when it comes to diversity, I think there's a long way to go in terms of what this industry has to offer, particularly for Latinos and African Americans. So I think my advice to the people of color or students of color is, there's a lot of opportunity here in international trade that you can take advantage in so many ways. And whether it's called as a lawyer in international law or as an engineer in capital improvement projects. And I mean, you can name the discipline. There's room here in international trade to take advantage of expertise here. So, but as a whole, for the whole student body, I think you basically gotten the picture in terms of what international trade means to this country. Now, again, whether it's China or anyone else in terms of where this movement goes to and the trade comes to and from, history will show you that international trade will always be here. So I don't see any steps back in terms of what we need to do. And by that, I mean, obviously, I worked for an administration, that is the Obama administration, who had a very, very high priority to elevate exports, that is promote manufacturing here and exports good to other countries. That is part of the international trade formula, exports as well as imports. So I think the last part of your question is, I think number one is to get a skill set that would put you in a good position to be a player here in international trade. And I think education is like I was back in the 70s at Long Beach State. I had mentors who guided me in terms of how important education was. And of course, now, many, many, many years later, education is still important. So that's my strong advice, is for people to get an education. And then of course, once you graduate, doors will open. And sometimes you'll end up in a scenario that you never foresaw, like myself. At your age, or for those students who are watching, when I was at Long Beach State, I knew I was going to be a lawyer. That was my objective. But again, obviously, my career changed here in the last several years, but it's all because of a good education. I was in a good situation. And last, networking is so important. Whatever field you want to go into, find those people who are in the field and get involved with them, network and learn from their experience.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you said networking. I know for myself, that has been perhaps the greatest asset that I've been able to develop over my time, both at Cal State Long Beach and since graduating. You know, I lived in DC as well for a period of time, and it was because I knew folks there that I was able to grow in my career there. And then when I came back, it was reaching out to the community that I built here in Long Beach that got me my next job. So networking is an incredible resource, and I'm happy that you touched upon that. And I guess to that point, are there any groups within the city of Long Beach that kind of focus in on international business, international trade that graduating seniors should look at in terms of networking opportunities, maybe meetups, or is there an international business association that is post-graduation that maybe they can look out to here in the city?
Well, I think I would advise everybody to look at our website, because part of what we do here in Long Beach, we're supportive of various trade associations. So I think whether it's related to the harbor trade people and those associations within the region here, the educational community, and of course, networking with industry, whether it's in the retail area or our marine terminal operators. And of course, the city of Long Beach has a number of programs that, again, I believe would benefit those who have a specifically interest in international trade in the Port of Long Beach. So I think you commence with identifying those associations. Visit our website again at pob.com. And those of you who feel free to contact any of us here at the Port of Long Beach. As an example, if you're an engineer there at Long Beach State and you have aspirations to work in capital improvement projects and maritime work, then pick up the phone and call our managing director, Sean Gamet. These are things that as a student, I did not do. I did some networking, but I didn't know the importance of that. In fact, as a student, I knew very few professional people. So I think my advice to students is don't be afraid to pick up the phone. In fact, those of you who want to talk to me one-on-one, well, don't be afraid, give me a call. I'll be more than happy to talk to any of you and do what I can to see what opportunities that I could relate to you and be an assistance to you, particularly when it comes to the port, international trade, and goods movement overall.
Be careful, Mario. You may have people calling you nonstop there with that.
Well, as my assistant, Stacy Rabasa, will tell you, I am 24/7. So whether you call me at 10 at night or 6 in the morning, this is part of my job.
Thank you. Another question that we had, one to kind of look a little bit about your history going back. So the transition that you had, at Long Beach State in political science and then into law and then eventually into maritime. How did that happen? And can you just talk a little bit about how that career, a little bit more about that career growth in terms of how you transitioned from one area to the next?
So when I was at Long Beach State, I was involved in what was then known Chicanos for Law, pre-law program. It was a group of Latinos, as we are known now, but back then it was, many of us used the word Chicanos. And so I wanted to be a lawyer since I was 17. And I knew what I wanted to do in life. And the reason is because at 17, I met this person at a retreat for LA Unified School District students. And it was the first lawyer I ever met, who happened to be Mexican American. And from there, I fell in love with what I saw in terms of the opportunities in the legal community, and I did that. But to your question, Austin, after many, many years of practicing law, I was the first person I want to give credit for where my life changed in terms of another career is former Mayor Beverly O'Neill. Beverly appointed me to the Harbor Commission in 2003. And she had faith in me that I could somehow push the envelope in terms of making sure there was a voice for the community and for the Port of Long Beach to do some things that related to environmental mitigation, for mitigating the impacts of air emissions and more community involvement. So I always want to give credit to Beverly O'Neill, because but for that appointment to the Harbor Commission, the doors that opened thereafter never would have opened. And so that was a game changer for me. I continued to practice law. And then one day in 2010, I got a call that I did not expect from the White House asking me whether I was interested to be appointed to the Federal Maritime Commission. I, of course, said yes, without even thinking that, well, maybe I'm at the end going to be that guy, because I'm sure they were calling 50 other people throughout the nation at least. But when the decision came after being interviewed that, yes, you're the guy, at the time I've always been teaching part-time at Long Beach City College, as you referenced. That is up to that point in 2011. And I did what I tell my students. When that door opens for you, walk through it. And again, it's all about determination and confidence. So I think there's two things that happened there that brought me to my current position. Number one and foremost, the opportunity that Beverly O'Neill gave me, particularly as a person of color, to participate on the Board of Harbor Commission. Back then, there were very few people throughout the country with that opportunity. And second, again, the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. At the level that I did, because I'm a LA boy. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, so to speak, and then the latter part in Gardena, my junior high and high school years. But I'm California. I had never lived outside of California, but then I decided that in 2011, in my older years, I'm going to Washington, D.C. It was risky, but obviously it paid off. I'm in this position now, and as last I will say, to those of you who have a go for it, because it may be tough, but when you get there, it feels so good. And that's my advice. Go where your heart takes you.
Thank you for that. You mentioned this before, and I would like to get your perspective on, I guess, being a person of color and in the maritime industry. One, I guess, is how do you begin to get the next generation excited for this opportunity? I know that the port has worked together with both COCB, LVCC, and I believe Long Beach Unified to create programs, but I always find that there are still barriers for people of color to go in this field, and maybe it's because they don't see enough folks like themselves in those roles. Maybe it's because they don't understand the opportunities that may be available to them. But I guess, how is the port, and maybe this is more to you directly, how do you think we should be encouraging people of color, particularly from the Long Beach community, to look at this as a serious opportunity?
That's a great question, Austin. I would say that the next generation has spoken. And I think they actually have motivated the country to have this conversation. These conversations were had when I was a student at Long Beach State. And we've made a lot of progress as a nation and as people of color. I mean, obviously, I never imagined that in 2011, the country was going to vote for an African-American president. Or excuse me, 2009 or 2008, I went to 2011 to Washington, D.C., but in 2010, I was going to get a call from the President of the United States who was African-American. Back then, many of us thought that, man, we've made a great step in this country. However, today, we have our challenges again and ongoing. So I think, again, despite the progress that we've made as a country and as communities, Austin, as you've referenced, there's still opportunities that need to be taken advantage of, and opportunities to present for people, particularly in fields where the diversity is not as much as we should have. Now, on that question again, the Port of Long Beach, currently we're having a plan of action to how we talk about these issues, and of course, how we continue to work with minority communities and people of color with regard to opportunities in international trade, whether it be engineers, managers, environmental specialists. So I think on the one hand, you know, at the Port of Long Beach, you know, we have personnel-wise, you know, decent diversity here, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's perfect. It's a lot better than you have in other areas, and more specifically in other parts of the country. So as an industry that is international trade, again, I would like to make sure that those opportunities, for example, the import-export business, entrepreneurship, and taking advantage of what international trade has to offer. I mean, keep in mind that in Long Beach alone, the impact of the Port of Long Beach to the city with regard to direct and indirect jobs that come from this port is 55,000. At the regional level, that figure comes in almost at 500,000 plus. And at the state level, there's 700,000, about 720,000 jobs, direct and indirect, as a result of this business here at the Port of Long Beach. And when you look at the goods movement impact from the two ports, both Port of LA and Port of Long Beach, it's again a very high amount of jobs created by international trade. So I think on that, you know, I'm hopeful that for those kids, whether it's Cabrillo High School or Jordan High School or Poly High School, when they see people in my position here, as I did as a 17-year-old, I would never have decided to be a lawyer had I not met a lawyer at that age that looked like me. And that gave me a lot of inspiration about the possibilities. So I think for those of us who are in these positions, we still have to create those mentors or have mentor programs, internships, and opportunities where we have that plan of action to make sure that this port is open to anyone who has a dream, who wants to pursue a career. So with that, I'm on board with almost every organization in this country that now has a real conversation about what needs to be had in furthering diversity in this country, not only in treatment, but in opportunity.
Thank you. It looks like we have a few questions as it kind of relates to the environment, sustainability, and kind of green port initiatives. So I'll go ahead and read those for you. So first question is, does the port help fund any infrastructure such as highways, public transportation, etc., for LA County? And as this person writes, it seems the expanded efficiencies of the port, more trucks will be on the road, creating further traffic. What is the port doing to ensure that the splash effect isn't harming the community, which is already tough on many families? And secondly, is the port funding any type of higher ed research around pollution and its effects?
Well, as to question number one, you know, what the port has done now for many years is exemplified leadership in environmental practices, what we call sustainable development. I think the policy that was heard around the world in the port industry was the Green Port policy that was initiated here at the Port of Long Beach in January of 2005. That was a plan of action that put as a priority sustainable development, engagement with the community, and reduction of emissions. And from that policy, we moved with our partners, the Port of Los Angeles, in 2006 to jointly come together, and we created the Clean Air Action Plan. And as a result of that plan, the port complex, or I'll speak for the Port of Long Beach, we reduced harmful emissions substantially. When you talk about PM, particulate matter, it was a reduction in a 10-year period, or less for that matter, of 88% in particulate matter. NOx somewhere around 59%, and SOx at the level of the 90th percentile. And what we're doing today is we're not just reducing emissions. Our goals today is to eliminate emissions. And thus we have the 2017 Clean Air Action Plan that we're working with our partner, the Port of Los Angeles, to have a goal that by 2030, cargo handling equipment in the port complex will all be zero emission. And by 2035, the transportation of these containers by the harbor drayage trucks would all be by way of zero emission trucks. So I think it's not only leadership that we've exhibited in the past, but leadership that we continue in terms of our zero emission goals. And on that regard, there is no other gateway in the world that has a plan already in place. And we are currently, again, have demonstration projects in the port with regard to the zero emission equipment and of course, zero emission trucks. Now we're still way off in terms of that. But again, obviously what we've done in that area, I think is second to no one, or for that matter, not only in this industry, but in any industry.
And the second part of that question was, is the port looking to partner, or has it partnered with CSOB on any type of sustainable research as it relates to pollution or developing policies, as you noted earlier with the 2017 one, that it could implement further, or that it could share with other port organizations?
Well, the port has collaborated with not only the city, the county, and the state of California with regard to our endeavors to reduce emissions. Obviously, we need to have that collaborative effort to really have an impact. Now, in terms of the education community, I think, again, we've on several fronts in the past have collaborated with education. As example, the implementation of the excellence, the Maritime Excellence Program, the Center of Maritime Excellence. And of course, we're very fortunate to have now at Long Beach City College, Luann Bynum, former commissioner here at the Port of Long Beach. She's doing a great job in furthering the maritime footprint. But in terms of the question specific as to research, I'm certainly open to work with the university system as much as we can to, again, not only give opportunity to work with these dynamic research entities, like, for example, MetTrans. We've had work with them in the past. It's a combination of USC and Long Beach State. Dr. Tom O'Brien, as you know, at Long Beach State is involved with that. So yeah, we're always open to whatever partnerships that we can have as a port and engage our educational partners with regard to the opportunities and particularly research opportunities that we may have that, again, not only would serve the interests of the Port of Long Beach, but of course serve the interests of the universities, and more important, for the students to be part of experiencing a dynamic in terms of what that future lays for us in the coming years.
Gotcha. Thank you. We have about 7 minutes left, and so I just want to be mindful of time on that. So I'll ask the last two questions from our audience, and again, these are kind of looking a little bit more about internship opportunities and really how you see the vision of the port going forward. So the first question is, does the port provide many internship opportunities? And if so, how can individuals find that information? And then the last question would be, what is your vision for the future of the port? And I think we touched upon a few of those components, but if you can just kind of sum that up in our last few minutes.
What was the last question, Austin?
What's your vision for the port?
Oh, okay. All right, so let's go to the first question. The port has been a leader in providing internships going back a few years. Again, I mentioned the Green Port policy in 2005. That laid the groundwork for community engagement. Part of that engagement was to engage with our educational institutions, whether at the university level or the high school level. And of course, that evolved into internship opportunities at both levels. And when another Long Beach State alumni came in a position of influence, I'm talking about Mayor Robert Garcia. Those of us, when he started there as mayor, one of his prime or priorities was to further internships, not only here at the city, but of course, departments like the Harbor Department, which we have. So unfortunately, COVID-19 now has not allowed us to move with the internship program this summer for the obvious reasons. But again, I look forward to continuing to elevate the internship possibilities for students overall. I will say, like I said, I mentioned the importance of networking, but for those young people who may not be able to find a job, if there is an internship available for you, I would take advantage of that, because again, at the end of the day, especially for those who have a limited resume because of where they're at in their educational career, is try to fortify that resume with internships, particularly in the field that you have an interest in. So I think, again, on that question, we'll do everything I can to continue to have our sustainable internship program here at the Port of Long Beach.
And just the last question is, what's your vision for the future for?
Well, my vision for the Port of Long Beach has been not only to continue to be known as an environmental steward, that is the green port of the future, as the commission has said, but also parallel to that, the vision that people also know the Port of Long Beach for operational excellence in this industry. And I think you all capture that, in my view, in the way that my vision for this port complex here at the Port of Long Beach is that one day we need to be 24/7. That is, we need to have a substantive day operation, which we always had, and a substantive night operation. So I think with that, I think if we continue to work towards those goals, which are, not short term, but, part of the challenge that we have here in Southern California is, trade shippers, they have other choices. Even with the Asia dynamic, the choices now, because of the amplification of the Panama Canal, that is, larger vessels can go through the canal. And because of the great work my colleagues have done in their respective gateways in the East Coast and in the Gulf, shippers have choices. So for us here at the Port of Long Beach, I think competition that has kind of hampered us here in the last few years by losing what we call market share, that is the share of cargo that comes from Asia, we can no longer pretend to say that we capture the majority of that market. We need to remain competitive. So the great thing about competition is it elevates your level of the service that you need to give. So in conclusion, in my mind, the vision here is that one day we will be 24/7. And I think that's going to be a level of competition that, because of what we have, I mentioned our capital improvement projects, our proximity to the most important trade region to this country, which is Asia. That's not going to change anytime soon. We'll be in a very good position to remain competitive and continue to have that positive economic impact, not only to the city, but the state of California with regard to the jobs that come from this industry. So that's my vision, Austin.
Well, I think that it is an excellent vision. I hope to see 24/7 port in the near term, once we can get out of all this uncertainty that we face with COVID. Well, with that, Mario, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. I want to thank you again for your time. I know it's been well received by many of our alumni and our students that have been in attendance of this webinar. And I think I'm going to have to hold you to, allowing our students to be able to contact you if they're looking. Awesome. Yes, sir.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah, by all means.
I forgot to mention the great story I always love to say as a Long Beach State alumni. As a freshman at Long Beach State, I was at the old student union, not the one you have there now, but what used to be a student union of sorts. It was more like a cafeteria. And I met a young lady there that year who was born and raised in Long Beach. And that was, there are three women that made a difference in my life. Number one, my mother, Alicia Cordero. Number two was my current wife. The young lady who I met there at Long Beach State was Gloria, and now Gloria Cordero. So I met my wife there as a freshman at Long Beach State, and here we are many, many years later. And so I wanted to mention that. And of course, the third woman that changed my life in the direction, as I mentioned already, former Mayor Beverly O'Neill. So those are three women that are very important in terms of who I am today. And actually, I should say my wife is number one on the list. I'm a mama's boy. I always have been.
Well, hopefully she doesn't catch this recording and is like, why am I not number one? All right, but thank you again, Mario, for your time today.
Thank you,
Really
Austin, Naomi, and Cynthia. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And to the young people of Long Beach State, go Beach.
Go Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Just a reminder, this session was recorded. Please remember to follow us on social media at CSUB Alumni to learn about future chats like this. Thank you.